Cheers, Missoula, and welcome to the Last Best Beer Show, brought to you each week on Newstalk KGVO. I am Ryan Newhouse, a longtime beer geek, beer writer, and all-around cheerleader for good craft beer. This new show is Montana's only radio program dedicated solely to Montana beer. We now have 60 breweries in operation in the state, so I thought it'd be a good time to start talking about them. Here's what I can promise the listeners each week. We'll discuss what's new, what's trending around Missoula and beyond when it comes to brewing, serving, and enjoying Montana beer. Second, we'll have in-depth interviews with those involved in all sides of the industry. Third, we'll cover what's happening nationally with craft beer. For instance, did you know that Budweiser is buying Miller Coors? We'll cover the innovators, the acquisitions, and all the fun stuff in between. We will also spend time each week discussing my two favorite topics, beer and food. We'll go over pairing suggestions, recipes, and talk with the chefs and restaurateurs who are making beer a central part of their menus. So let's get started. I want to talk about what's going on around Missoula. So let's get started. Let's find out what's happening around Missoula. At Imagination Brewing Company at 1151 West Broadway, join them Tuesday night for live music from the Crackers. They play traditional Irish music from 6 to 8 p.m. On Thursday at Imagination, get your first glass of beer free with any growler fill. And on Friday, join them for Teacher Appreciation Day. All teachers get half off their first glass of beer to show their appreciation for what they do in the community. At Warden's Market, 451 North Higgins, go there to find good craft beer. It's always been my favorite place to shop. They've been around since 1883, and they are Missoula's first grocery store. Go in and tell them that the Last Best Beer Show sent you. At Bayern Brewing at 1507 Montana Street, go check out the Edelweiss Bistro. It's the only place in Missoula you can get authentic German schnitzel. They have over 12 German-style lagers that are brewed there at Bayern. At the Dram Shop at 229 East Front Street, they're located by the Trailhead. They are Missoula's growler fill station and tap room. On Sunday, October 25th, to kick off their Pumpkin Beer Fest, the Dram Shop is partnering with Taste Buds Kitchen to bring a spooky fun family event. It will feature gingerbread house making and excellent pumpkin beers. At Draftworks, 915 Toole Avenue, they always invite you to come out. What I think is to see, they always invite you out to their patio, which is one of the best in Missoula. Their Growler Mondays will give you a free pint when you fill up your growler. And one of my favorite events is the Wednesday Real Ale Pour. Real ale is beer served from a cask. It's a very traditional way to serve beer. And if you don't know what it is, go in there and check it out on Wednesday. It is good stuff. And if you enjoy Montana craft beer and everything else that the local breweries have to offer, why don't you see what it's like behind the scenes and enroll in the School of Extended and Lifelong Learning Montana Brews online course. You'll get to see the breweries, the brewers, and you'll get recipes for some of our most beloved Missoula beers like Cold Smoke and Moose Drool. It's a 5-part online course you take at your own pace, but it's all about home brewing and beer. You're listening to the Last Best Beer Show with Ryan Newhouse on Newstalk KGVO 1290 AM and 101.5 FM. Listen live to the Last Best Beer Show online and on demand at newstalkkgvo.com. Look under the On Air tab for our show. This week, news was made that Budweiser is in the process of purchasing Miller Coors, and there are multiple sides to this happening. One of the unique things that will happen is if the merger goes through, it is dependent on an investigation by the Department of Justice, but if it goes through, they will combined own 35% of the world beer market and 75% of the U.S. beer market. We'll just have to think about that. We'll have to see what that will do, if anything, to the craft brewers and their quest for shelf space. So stay tuned in the coming weeks to this show and we'll talk about it. It's autumn. It's October. It's an excellent time to enjoy beer. The winter beers are coming on full force. In fact, this week at Bayern Brewery, they just started bottling Doppelbock, and they are putting together a winter warmer 12-pack. The nights are a little longer, a little cooler, so it's time to drink. But if you think October, you might think of Oktoberfest. It takes place in Munich, Bavaria, Germany. Oktoberfest is a 16-day folk festival. It just ended in early October. Most of it happens in September. But for this annual festival, 6 million people from around the world descend on Munich to drink beer. The Oktoberfest started in 1810, and other cities around the world often have Oktoberfest celebrations. The whole reason that Oktoberfest started in the first place was all about a marriage. A king and a princess getting married on October 12th, 1810. The citizens of Munich were invited to attend the festivities that were held there at the city gates to celebrate this royal event. So there were fields there called Teresa's Meadows in honor of the crown princess. And those fields are still there. They still keep their name. But to end the celebrations from the royal wedding on October 17th, there were horse races that took place, and there were foods brought in, and, of course, beer. But it was really the horse races that gave Oktoberfest its tradition and the ability to come back every year and every year. 40,000 race spectators would come back each year after that to watch horse races. There were tastings of wine and beer that took place all over. Before each race started, a performance would be held as an homage to the bridegroom and royal family. So 16 pairs of children would be dressed in these beautiful costumes, and you see some of these costumes now today, traditional lederhosen. But all of this was to celebrate, ultimately, a marriage, but also just a community getting together once a year, watching something together, enjoying beer, enjoying food, but enjoying each other's companionship. So there were only a few years since 1810 that Oktoberfest did not happen. There was a plague, and there were some wars, but by and large, this was something that everybody looked forward to every year, and they made it happen. So if you think of Oktoberfest or you hear of Oktoberfest events happening around your area, check them out and just understand that the history, sure, is tied to beer, but more so, it's just tied to an opportunity to hang out with your community. I'm very excited about this next segment that we're going to be covering every week in the show, and it is all about beer and food. And if you think about it, you go out to dinner, you've got a choice. Often, beer or wine, if you're drinking. Maybe you choose, depending on what your date or significant other is choosing. But what we're seeing now in a lot of places are chefs, restaurant owners, bartenders even. They're bringing up the idea that beer can go with food as easily, or even sometimes better, than wine will go for it. Then wine will go with it. So now chefs are designing menus not to be paired with a Pinot Noir or a Bordeaux, but maybe the neighborhood porter or that silver medal Scotch ale that we have in Missoula Cold Smoke. This is an opportunity to broaden our palate, think about beer in a different way, and talk about it. Talk about it with our date or whoever we're sitting next to, and discover. We're going to discover what we like. So with that in mind, I want to go over a pretty simple guide to pairing beer with food. These are very general guidelines, just something to keep in mind when you go out, because ultimately, as you know, you drink beer, you might like it, your friend might not as much. That's why we have over 100 styles of beer brewed, officially recognized. We have 4,000 craft breweries in the United States today, just over, and each one is bringing their passions, their palates to the table. But let's think about how we can sit down with a glass of beer and dinner and think about what's going to go well together. So the number one tip that I will give you when pairing beer and food is really just start with your senses, right? Just smell what's going on, see what's going on. So what's your beer smell like? Is it fruity? Is it roasty? Are you getting grass from hops? Are you getting sort of a pine scent? Just spend some time understanding what's going on there. Same goes for your food. Do you have something spicy? Do you have something rich? Do you have some wonderful, deep southern fried chicken? All of that good stuff. The second tip is, let's find some common ground. Beer is very, very versatile, as is food. So find out what that common ground is between the beer and the dish that you have. You can look for flavors that either complement each other or contrast with each other. It's, to me, one of the most fascinating parts of putting beer and food together is finding out how they work together or how they work against each other. But in the end, it's a good pairing. The third tip is, don't let any one style or any one beer dominate. You might like a particular beer with your fish tacos, and you go with that every week, every time that you're out there. But experiment a little bit. Try, for instance, some delicious smoked ribs and a German Kolsch. The German Kolsch beer is crisp. It's very light. It's going to let all of the good stuff from the smoked ribs, happen without any interruption from the beer. So in general, if you think about intensely flavored foods, they'll cover up lighter beers. And vice versa. If you have rich, dark, roasty beers like porters and stouts and Scotch ales, those will cover up any lighter foods. You think salads. Here are some more general guidelines just to think about. If you have a beer that's above 6% ABV. Now, ABV stands for alcohol by volume. It essentially tells you how much alcohol is in that glass of beer. For reference, if you have a glass of wine, wine is typically 12 to 14% ABV, alcohol by volume. Beers can range from as low as 3% ABV, well up into 15 or 17%. So if you have a beer that's on the lighter side, 6% ABV or less, don't pair it with lighter foods like fish or salad or even eggs. Think of going with something that has, pardon the pun, a little more meat on its bones, right? A nice juicy hamburger with a light beer. That's one of the best summertime combinations ever. Burger and a beer. If you want some specific recommendations for let's think of a Berliner Weiss, a sometimes salty, sometimes sourish beer. Going to go great with a Greek salad. Chili. It's getting cold. Let's make some hunter stew. Let's make some chili. A good English strong ale is going to pair very well with that. So here's a fourth tip. Really, it's a balancing act. If you have food with a dominant flavor that's going off in one direction, you'll find that right beer that will rein it in. Right? Here's a perfect example. Hot foods, right? The wild wings, the hot wings, spicy tacos. So if you drink a beer that's high in alcohol, all you're doing is throwing fuel on the fire. Right? You might like that. But if you're going to have spicy food, balance it. Balance it with something lighter, a pale ale, a session IPA. Now, session IPAs, session beers, if you don't know what those are, these are light beers. These are 4% alcohol, sometimes less. And the whole idea is that you can have more than one in, quote, a session. And it's not going to carry you away too much. There are several breweries in Missoula, around Montana, that are making some excellent session beers. So the next time you're at your favorite brewery, ask them about it. You'll like it. So think of another food example here. You got a rich, creamy Alfredo pasta dish, nice and heavy, and it's good. What would you pair with that? Well, you got to get something that is going to cut through the heavy cream and the heaviness of the dish. So think of something bitter. So bitterness in beer can come out two ways. You can have bitterness in a porter because of the roast and the barley. So those flavors are like drinking a cup of black coffee. Get a bitter roast. The other bitterness comes out through hops. IPAs are one of the most favorite American beers that brewers are making. And if you get a strong, hoppy IPA, India Pale Ale, that's going to cut through the heaviest of dishes. Now, in general, one of the classic combinations is to pair IPA with tacos or IPA with spicy food. Doesn't always have to be that way. Pay attention to what you're having and what you want. What mood are you in that day? So here's another tip, and it's one that people don't spend a lot of time thinking about, but think about all of those bubbles in your beer, right? What are the bubbles? That's the carbonation. That's the head of beer. Sometimes you find a bottle and you pop it open and it's gushing. All of that is carbonation. So this is something that really separates beer from wine, other than champagne. Wine does not have this carbonation. So you don't get the same reaction on your palate with wine as you do with carbonated beer. But that's also, the carbonation in beer is what is refreshing your palate. It will actually clean your palate. It will scrub it from whatever you've had that last bite. And so you're ready to do it all over again. So this is really important when it comes to fatty foods that will coat your palate. And you have a beer that will be higher in carbonation and it will wipe that slate clean. So if you look for a good German wheat beer or Belgian high carbonation, lots of head, lots of foam, those are going to pair well with fatty foods. For an experiment, try this. Get a German Hefeweizen. Bayern Brewery makes great ones. You can find them at Warden's. You can find them at the brewery. Get your favorite goat cheese. Try that creamy, rich cheese and wash it down with Hefeweizen and do it again and again. You get to relive that experience each time. Here's probably my last tip on pairing beer and food, and that's simply just be adventurous, right? Have a good time with it. You're already out having a good time. So let this be an extension of it. There's no rules ultimately, right? Just choose great beer. Start there. Try local first, then move on. So the best pairing in the world really won't make up for a bad beer. Choose good beer and pair it together. And that's the best recommendation, I think. So if you want a cheat sheet, though, I know we all like them. I know we like to pull it out of our pockets and be ready with all the answers. So I'll run down a quick list. These are very general concepts again. All right. Today we are pouring a Bayern Brewing Oktoberfest out of a crowler. Now this crowler is a 32-ounce aluminum can. They're new on the market. There's a few places in Montana that do it, but what's nice about these is they will fill any beer that they have on tap, seal it for you, and there you go. You've got a one-use container, 32 ounces of beer. It's about a half a growler. And then the best part is you can recycle the container when you're done. Take it on the river, all of that good stuff. So I am here with my friend Scott Richmond, and we're going to drink some beer together, and we're going to talk about what Oktoberfest is, what this style is, and sort of what we think about it. Are you ready?
I'm excited.
Oh, man. What kind of beer do you go for?
I love IPAs.
IPAs, all right.
Yeah. I like hoppy IPAs.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
Ooh.
Uh-oh.
Oh, I like to see I'm not the only one that makes a mess.
It looks like a meal.
It is. Well, funny you should say that. And so the Oktoberfest is generally higher gravity, higher alcohol beer. And we associate it with Oktoberfest season. The true style of this beer is called a Marzen lager. And being a lager, and from Bayern, which is a very traditional German brewery, we're going to have a yeast that's called a bottom fermenting yeast. And what's nice about lager yeast is it really smooths the whole beer out. You get that. You get macro brews that are also called lagers. They're also lagers, but it's nothing jarring, really smooth. You get to accentuate a lot of the malts that are in these beers, and that's what it is. Like, this is a traditional German beer, and they didn't have the temperature controls that we had. I'm going to top you off a little more.
Okay.
But anyway,
cheers.
Cheers to you.
Thank you.
Going back to fall's really my favorite time to drink beer. Cooler weather, little higher gravity beers coming out. But I tell you, we got a little bit ahead on this, and that happens. It's it's just filled today, but I don't know. It's the color, it's the richness of it, and I'll put you on the spot. So if I poured you this beer,
let me have another sip before I render my opinion. It's got a head on it, right?
What are you going to pair this with? What would you think? What do you get hungry for?
That's a good question, actually.
And there's no wrong answer.
No, I'm sure. You know what? I'd like it with maybe a nice light fish, and I'll tell you why. Because I like the beer is pretty powerful, but. And as I said, it's like a meal. It feels like a meal. So something a little lighter on the food side.
Perfect.
I'll finish it off, and then I will feel like very satisfied.
Absolutely. That's right. It's a side item.
Right.
Fish and beer.
Exactly.
Indeed. Excellent beer. You can find this on tap right now at Bayern Brewing. Get down there, get it in a crowler, get it in your pint glass, get it in your growler, and we appreciate it, and we're going to keep enjoying this. So cheers.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm very excited to have in the studio with me my good friend, business partner, all-around good guy, craft beer geek. His name is Alan McCormick. He is the writer and founder of growlerfills.beer, and I'm happy to have him. So welcome, Alan.
Thanks, Ryan.
So you and I have done quite a bit of drinking together. I mean, we have done sampling together, a little bit of business. We have founded Missoula Craft Beer Week.
We did.
It happens in the end of April, early May. We have a lot of fun with that. But I want to talk a little bit about what you have done with growlerfills.beer. So why don't you fill our listeners in on what that is, what the blog is, why you started it and what you do with it.
Growlerfills.beer has been a journey for me. It was a way to start writing about beer at a time when apps like Untapped didn't exist. And so the way you kept notes about the beers you liked or didn't like was to create a blog. You wrote them down. That quickly evolved into something else because, frankly, doing reviews isn't all that much fun for me. And me telling you what you ought to drink isn't all that much fun for me either because we all have different palates.
That's true. So, and I've never agreed with you on any of those, I don't think.
Have never agreed with me on, yes, that's true.
Yes.
And your rating system is so bizarre that I don't think anybody could ever be expected to understand it.
I know.
But anyway, Growlerfills.beer evolved for me into a way to tell the stories about Montana beer and the craft beer industry. And so really it's given me a platform to explore issues that mainstream media isn't exploring and to use my expertise, particularly in the law, to try to explain Montana's complex and often odd alcohol regulation and a system that's created out of that. And then go behind the scenes and tell folks what's happening. From Tom Britz's great new commercial hop production farm up in Whitefish to Mark Hastings and Uber Brew and some of their great new awards they're getting for fabulous beer over in Billings. We get to talk about the stories and enjoy a few beers along the way.
I agreed. Blogging has been that platform for me, for many others, that we can take up the stories that we want to or be able to engage with readers and have them ask us questions and find out more information. But you brought up your day job, so to speak, and I know that definitely over the last couple legislative sessions when beer was a topic that a lot of people were turning to you. And I don't know, maybe why don't you tell us again a little bit more about what your day job is and then how that has applied to your beer writing specifically.
By day, I'm an attorney. Mostly real estate, local government, land use law. And the good thing about that is it's quite varied from helping individual folks do a real estate transaction to representing county government when they get sued over a controversial development project. But it also lets me work with breweries. So it lets me blend my two interests together. The day job, the interest that I have in law with working in the craft beer industry. And so we do a fair amount of trademark work for breweries. We do commercial leasing for them. We'll do employment law work for them. Anything that a small business might need, I and our firm does. And it's a great way to sort of bring some of that expertise in the law then into the blog to be able to help explain people how this stuff works. Montana is often viewed as being a complex regulatory state. Some folks would even say it's the worst in the country. It's not. Every state in the country is doing something different with the regulation that you can probably point to and say, life would be better in beer if that regulation were different. And we've certainly got quite a few of those in Montana.
Yep. Excellent point. That we are often, we do it when we talk about beer. This is the best or this is the worst or something like this, but it's different. It's that same mentality that we have a different set of laws on the books. We have different people coming in to play and making beer and distributing beer and selling beer. And so it seems to be an ever evolving conversation.
And it's still thriving.
Yes.
Look at Montana's craft beer scene. We just got the 60th brewery open, and despite the laws that aren't necessarily favorable for allowing that industry to thrive and survive, it is. So some folks point to that and say, hey, it's not broken, so don't go looking for solutions. But I think we all know that the licenses are limited, and not every small restaurant can put in 2 or 3 taps to help support the craft beer industry because they can't get a license to do it. Those licenses are all gone. Somebody else owns them, and it either costs them a fortune to go out and get them, or they just can't find one to buy. So it's interesting to think of how much more widespread the craft beer industry could be from your small local coffee shop that serves you your favorite latte in the morning can convert into a 2 or 3 tap house at night and continue sort of the love of best beverages all day long.
Yep. Excellent. Well, we're obviously in an off year between legislative sessions, but we'll have some stuff surely come in the next time that this goes around. I mean, what do you give our listeners just a little recap where we are and maybe where we might head?
The number one legislative issue that was dealt with in 2015 and will again be dealt with undoubtedly in 2017 2019 is this idea of license stacking. Everyone knows our breweries, you can go in and you can have 3 pints. You can have 48 ounces per person per day, and only between the hours of 10 a.m. and 8 p.m. And one of the ways that the breweries can kind of work around that is to separate their business, have a tap room owned by someone else under a different license, and the brewery is owned by the brewers under a different license. And a license stacking concept would allow them to jointly own both those licenses. It's a significantly controversial subject, though. The distributors have been against it. They're the ones who primarily fought it in the 2015 legislature. But just because we've just come out of one legislative session and it's another year and a half for the next one doesn't mean things aren't happening. There's meetings going on now. There's a loose coalition continuing to debate the issues and see how they can refine their proposal to maybe make it work next time. There's a lot going on behind the scenes and trying to figure out a better way to do our regulatory system.
Excellent. I mean, that's all you can do at this point, right? We're having conversations, we're having beers, we're trying to figure out where to go and what to do. I want to bring up another part of your life, which is also about beer. You are obviously a talented lawyer, a talented beer writer, a runner, but you're also...
I didn't even pay you to say that.
I know. That was free of charge. That's on me. I probably lost a bet sometime. Now I'm paying it back.
Yeah, I can't wait to get the email from you on what you want next for that kind comment.
Get out of jail free card.
Right.
So let's talk about your passion for home brewing. I read a recent article in Missoula Lifestyle magazine that touts and sings your praises of home brewing and beer writing. But what do you like about home brewing? What's satisfactory about it? And other than the great beer that you share with people like me?
Home brewing is creative. It's a process where you can look at each individual ingredient, not unlike baking or creating some kind of great new food. You can take a look at the ingredients that you have and create a flavor profile that you want. You can go out and execute that using different hops, malt, yeast, looking for those flavors that you really want to drink. And the best part about it is being able to put it in your own keg, put it on a kegerator at the house, pull that tap, and there you've got your own beer that you really love to drink right there, fresh, crisp. Everything that you love about beer is available to you, having started with grain, this crunchy goodness, malted barley that you turn into something that you really like to drink.
Yep. And I've brewed with you at least a couple times, maybe one or two times, and I tell you that the process that I've seen you go through is as much fun as trying the finished product, right? I mean, that seems to be what the home brewing community gets behind. It is creative. It is sharing the finished product, but the actual brew day, I mean, that's fun.
There's nothing better.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll often do it in the morning. So I'll get up early on a cool Saturday morning, middle of summer, and get the equipment out, start filling up with water and getting the grains put into the barley crusher and getting them milled and ready. And then those aromas just start hitting you. You get that nice, sweet, malty aroma that comes out of the mash tun. You take that, put it into the kettle, start adding those hops, and all of a sudden you get these different aromas and flavors coming out of the hops, and it's just a fabulous day in this process of going through creating beer. It's so much fun, and it's no wonder why so many folks who do home brewing have that itch to go commercial and turn it into a lifetime business for them. And then they remember how much cleaning it is and how much a pain in the ass it is, because the joke, which really isn't a joke, has always been that being a brewer is 75 to 80% being a janitor, cleaning up after yourself and cleaning before you start. And so, but anyway, home brewing is a great day, great process, great time to be one with the grain, which might be the dumbest thing I've ever said.
That's all right. We'll keep that part, though.
I'll bet you will.
What are your aspirations as a home brewer, if there are any? Are you ready to take over the world? Are you ready to open the 61st brewery in Montana? Or do you just want to line your wall with medals and trophies?
I don't think there's any more wall space left for all of my medals and trophies. All one of them.
Yes.
Honestly, homebrewing is something I like to keep simple. There's lots of guys in Missoula and beyond who have very complicated systems, these recirculating mash systems, multi-tiered systems, all the fanciest new equipment. And I have a orange 10-gallon cooler and a big 10-gallon pot and a couple of spoons and thermometers and a hydrometer, and that's what I like to use. I like to keep it simple. And I do experiment, certainly, with the recipes and the kinds of beer that I make, but really I like a good IPA, the perfect IPA or the perfect porter or the perfect stout. One of those just... when you do it right, you know you've hit a home run.
Yep.
And I'm not really one to try the rose petal, peach pit, granola infused whatevers of the day.
Which is obviously barrel aged and, upside down barrels too.
With a hint of cat essence. I forgot that part. But yes, I like perfecting those basic recipes, because then once you have that basic recipe down, then you can figure out, okay, what do I need to tweak to get just that perfect flavor to it?
Yeah.
And so I spend more time perfecting my brown ale recipe, perfecting an IPA recipe, and then throwing that IPA recipe out and starting another one. That's really it for me with the home brewing, is you get to do that sort of thing as much as you want, whenever you want, and it's a great, great thing to spend a Saturday doing, or a Tuesday night doing.
Anytime, all the time. Can you point to any beers in particular commercially made, either in Montana or abroad or beyond, that maybe inspired you to take on the perfecting the IPA or the brown ale? Are there any beers out there that really made you want to create your own?
There's no question that Blackfoot River Brewing Company's single malt IPA is one of the best IPAs anywhere. And almost from the first time I had that, I thought, I don't want to recreate it, but now I know what the style of IPA is that I want. And so I'm not interested in cloning, because I can always run out and get a Blackfoot IPA or something similar to it from the commercial brewers. But one of the best things about tasting beer like that and being a home brewer is you can say, okay, what are the hops in that? Well, it turns out they're Simcoe and Cascade. Okay, that's how I get those flavors. Now I can figure out how to make a different beer, but using those same flavor profiles, knowing I'm going to get this citrus, this grapefruit, this sort of little bit of tropical melon kinds of flavors in there. How do I create it? Well, I found this beer that I really like drinking. I drank it and I figured out what was in it. Now I can create not the same beer, but I can create something of my own creation that have been inspired by whatever it was I was tasting.
Yeah. Excellent. So I want to shift topics a little bit, because one of the things that you and I have spent a lot of hours doing over the last few years, and what really brought us together too, is deciding to do Missoula Craft Beer Week. Now, we're going to come up on our 5th year together doing that, but I remember us sitting together and with some of our original partners in this, and for some reason we thought it would be a good idea, with just a few weeks' notice, to put on a week-long events that had to do with craft beer. So why was that a good idea then, and why have we stuck with it?
The most amazing thing about that idea is we had no alcohol in our system at the time that we made that decision, which should have made us a little clearer-headed about it and known that was maybe not the best idea to dive into. But nevertheless, we did it. We pulled it off. We had, 20, 25 events that first year, started to get some buy-in from the breweries and the community on it. And I think there's nothing preventing this festival from eventually turning into the destination kind of thing that brings people into Missoula during that week. And it's a week where you don't have a lot going on in Montana. It always ends with the
Garden City Brew Fest. Yep, you got it.
Which serves as sort of this capstone to a great week of beer events where people can explore everything that Missoula has to offer. And, of course, all the regional breweries participate as well. But this fun week of events celebrating beer leading up to this great brew fest, it'll be a destination for sure within the next year or two.
Without a doubt. I mean, every event that we've suggested or partnered with other people to put together, again, 25 to 35 events during the week. It was patterned after a national American Craft Beer Week that's usually held in May, but now we've got Missoula that has their own. Okay, so we've got Missoula Craft Beer Week. We've got all these events over the years. What are some of the events that have stuck out in your mind that we've pulled off?
We've always pulled off a great movie night.
True.
Fills the top hat with lots of folks enjoying good beer, watching a movie about beer. What's better than that? Well, actually, human foosball.
Human foosball.
Lots of fun, folks, teams competing against each other. And what was amazing about that event was just how much people got into the competitive nature of human foosball.
Without a doubt.
I'm sure the beer may have helped that a little bit, but nevertheless. The Art on Tap was a fun event where people were taught how to paint a hop while enjoying craft beer at Cafe Dolce. Just fabulous series of events that have been designed specifically to let people interact with beer in different ways than just going to your standard garden variety pint night where a rep shows up, encourages everybody to have some of their beer, and you go home. Yep. These are better ways for people to socialize around beer, and that's really the point of Missoula Craft Beer Week, is creating ways that people can socialize. We all love beer. We all know that it has this sort of social effect, and you can make fast friends with anybody just by sitting down and having a beer and talking about it with them. And Missoula Craft Beer Week creates multiple opportunities to have those kinds of interactions throughout a week. That's precisely it. And Alan, I've always credited you this statement, but I've always appreciated you saying beer is social. And there's no doubt about it when you get events like this or you've got good craft beer at any one of these breweries. So I always appreciate you coming in. I always look forward to reading your next post at growlerfills.beer. You're always one of my favorites, and I appreciate you coming in today and sitting down with us at the Last Best Beer Show. Anytime. Thank you for a great show. Stay tuned next week when we talk about Business and Brews. So Business and Brews will be a monthly social network event. Whether you're an upstart, starving artist, or a seasoned professional, we all have stories and we all have ideas to share. So we're going to get together every month for a beer and a presentation that will make us all better at our professions and our passions.
Do you enjoy Montana craft beer and everything our local breweries have to offer? Have you thought about brewing your own beer but are not sure how to get started? Take the Montana Brews online course from anywhere at your own pace. In this 5-part online course, you will learn about some of the fine craft beers being brewed in the state today, with a focus on Missoula Breweries. Get an introduction to the magical world of home brewing and get insider access to recipes for some of the most notable Montana beers. For more info, visit umt.edu/brew. That's umt.edu/brew.